everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Apologies for being late. Totally on me. You might even see I might have a little bedhead there or whatever. As I was explaining to James, I am all over the place in terms of my sleep patterns. That's even why it says my name right there. It kind of describes the scrambled brain I've got right now. But James Tynion the fourth joins us on Word Balloon to talk about his excellent run on Batman. James, it's a pleasure. Welcome, and thank you very much for doing this, and thank you for tolerating my scrambled head tonight.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to do this.
Dude, do you remember us karaokeing years and years ago?
Oh, God, yes.
That a boy.
I used to do a lot of Comic-Con karaoke's, but I started weaning myself off because I was for one, it would always wreck my voice to be able to talk the next day. And then one time at New York Comic-Con, I tried to throw a big karaoke night, and I was expecting about 50, 75 people, and 200 showed up.
Wow.
And took over half of the place, and then left me with a bill that I needed to get some publishers to help me pay at the end of the night, because they were counting per head, per hour, and people weren't checking out. So it's that experience scarred me for life. But I'm still a big fan of karaoke.
Oh yeah, me too, man. I lived down the street from the place we went to. I wasn't at the time, but I ended up moving, and now I do. I live 5 minutes away. And
oh wow.
Yeah, and now I'm bummed. I got to do COVID karaoke. Got to figure out how to do it lockdown wise and stuff. I don't know if you've tried to do it at all since being in the shut-in.
Oh no, I've just been, although it has come up in a couple of conversations, but it has not been attempted on any of my Zoom hangouts or anything like that.
I understand. Well, your association, right now, first of all, obviously a great run on Batman. Congratulations. I think it's always a tough act to follow. I think King had a tough act to follow with Scott. Now you had the tough act to follow with Tom. And in both cases, I think succeeding quite well. So congratulations, man.
Thank you very much. I'm having an absolute blast. And, it's a tremendously scary job to step into, because not only is there Tom and Scott, there's the entire 80-year history of the character, and and not to mention all of the Batman stories I've already written. So it's just how do I, which has its pros and cons, honestly, stepping onto a job like this.
Well, but that is the good thing, is that you did, my God, as far as I remember, you go back to the Court of Owls at the very least. Am I correct? Didn't you assist Scott? And tell me about that, because really, I think that was, if I'm not mistaken, that might have been your first time, where I thought of you associated with the whole Bat situation.
Yeah, it was actually my first ever published comic book, was Batman number 8 in the new 52. I wrote the backup story. Co-wrote with Scott Snyder, and it was Raphael Albuquerque on art, and yeah, that was the start of everything. 2012.
Wow.
And it has honestly been a really, really a weird long road. I never expected to be able to spend so much time working in Gotham City, but yeah, it really is. It's one of my favorite fictional corners of any fictional universe, and I've loved these characters my entire life.
What didn't you co-write, or weren't you what was the weekly event? Weren't you one of the guys on the weekly event? You and Seeley and Scott and everybody?
Yes. So it was Batman Eternal, and then Batman and Robin Eternal. So yes. It was a 52 issue weekly series, followed by a 26 issue weekly series.
Jesus.
Followed almost immediately by the introduction of bi-weekly comics at DC. So
sure.
I've been stepping over into creator owned where I get to write monthly comics is great, because I've been running at full speed for a very, very long time.
So what intrigues you about Gotham City? I mean, obviously, yes, everybody loves Batman. We're all fans of Batman. But as far as from a writing standpoint, where did you feel like you had an in and something to say? You know, like you said, I mean, it is an 80-year tradition that you have to kind of meet.
Yeah, it's that's a really good question. It's so one of my first memories, honestly, was it wasn't seeing the movie itself, but it was seeing the advertisements for the Happy Meal toys for Batman Returns.
Outstanding, sure.
Yeah, and and it was Batman Returns and the animated series, which came out soon thereafter. That was my real introduction to the entire Batman mythos.
That's great.
I was about 4 or 5 when that came out. And so that really set the stage for what Gotham City was for me and introduced me to all of those characters for the first time. I was also one of those kids where I loved the DK essential encyclopedias that would pop up about all of these characters. So I had, my X-Men encyclopedia and I had my Batman encyclopedia. And that was really where I started getting my sense of like, okay, here's the full cast of characters. Here are how they all connect to one another. And from there it started. It built to the point that where my mom moved across the street from a Borders books, and I started going and sitting down in one of the armchairs there and reading through their entire graphic novel section. And I was drawn to the DC books, which were better collected at that point. There was just more DC books on the stands than on the shelves at Border than there were Marvel or anything else. And the book that really jumped out to me was Young Justice, which had Tim Drake in one of the starring roles. So that was sort of my weird sideways step into reading comics about the Bat family. But the Robins were really the characters that I connected to first and foremost, and more so in the comics than even. Because Dick Grayson, I love Dick Grayson. I think he's one of the best characters in all of comic books.
Agreed.
But the Dick Grayson that showed up on the Batman animated series was I was one of those people. I wanted the Batman episodes, not the Batman and Robin episodes. But once I started actually reading the comics and getting a sense of Tim Drake as a character, I saw this kind of a kid who was. He had a bit of confidence, but he wasn't as brash and in your face as some of the other characters. Like Superboy had a very big personality, and Impulse was just like all over the place. But Tim Drake was this kind of I wouldn't say shy, but a little more reserved and a little
He's
nerdy.
careful.
Yeah. And I really related to that. And I really, really cared about that character. And that's when I was just like, okay, now I'm in middle school. Take me to the comic shop, which is like 45 minutes away. And I'm going to start picking up every Young Justice issue that I can. And so I start building my idea of who is Tim Drake and how does he connect to the other cast of characters. And that's how it all really started for me, because I love like figuring out how all of these characters know each other. There's almost a weird like encyclopedic quality where it's just like, okay, this character knows this character from this story, so now I need to go hunt down this story and read it. And I was slowly putting all of that together, and and it all started building. But the real thing is there is this perfect mix of like, and I think it has to do with the fact that they're all humans. They are not superpowered characters. They are all these very human characters. They are in this sort of found family. They're a bunch of orphans and rejects from other corners of society, and they find meaning in this bat symbol, and they become something more. And so from that to discovering the comics that were concurrent at that time in the Batman universe, which was I wrote the first like big story that I read as it was coming out was the Bruce Wayne murderer / fugitive that was Brubaker and Rucka.
Sure.
And that like blew my mind because it started with that 10-cent adventure, which was just such a great comic in and of itself. And then it just branched out into this story that introduced me to every aspect of the DC universe corner, like the Gotham corner of the DC universe at that time. And I loved all of it. And I loved all of the characters. And I wanted to know more about all of them. And that's when I really started like diving deep into the current continuity stuff and building up. And that was a really exciting time. And by the time I was in high school, that's when like Infinite Crisis and everything like that was building, which was honestly those mid 2000 years was like with both Marvel and DC like really firing on all cylinders.
Agreed.
It was just a tremendously exciting time to be at an age where that was the first time I had a car and I could drive to the comic shop and pick up my own books. And like that, like, and I wasn't just subject to what was stocked at Borders. So like that's where it all sort of comes from me. That was a very rambling answer.
Not at all. James, are you kidding me? That's fantastic. And frankly, it was that period that brought me back to comics because I kind of checked out a bit in the early to late 90s. And Rucka's novel adaptation of No Man's Land was kind of my re-entry into the Batverse. And I just read that story and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Wow, I wonder what else is going on. And when I got there, Brubaker was on Batman and Greg was on Detective. And that's great because as a kid, I wonder what your take was from an art standpoint. Sean Martinborough drawing Detective.
Oh, yeah.
I loved it. And I honestly, it was so indie. And so, I mean, and I wonder as a young person coming to it fresh, I wonder how you felt about the look of Detective.
Honestly, it didn't strike me as like it's one of those things where because it was presented to me that way and because I came into it through the animated series, I had no preconceived notion of what a superhero comic looked like. Like obviously, Young Justice looked different than Batman and Detective, but that just meant that every book had its own feel and its own personality.
Absolutely.
And I liked some art more than others, but the Batman books looked like Batman books and they felt like Batman books, and that's all that mattered.
Of course. Absolutely. Yeah. That's great, man. And again, those writers and with Young Justice, I imagine it was Peter David.
Yes. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, man. No, these are to me still like some of the best writers that ever attempted comics. I miss Peter David on comics. I know he's still doing novels, and I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so I love his Star Trek work as well. So
his latter day X Factor run was also like that. I only read his earlier X Factor stuff like in my adult life, but I was reading like when he went back all the Layla Miller stuff and all of that. I ate all of that.
That's excellent, man. Man, there's so many great questions here and comments. Zach Odell, love all the new characters you've been created. Clown Hunter has me so excited. As his plans for the future for Gotham. I assume that's what he's saying. Oh, and also I really hope Luke for Backwing will be involved in future arcs. Yeah, I miss Luke, actually.
Yeah, I love Luke as a character. Writing him in Detective was a lot of fun. And I definitely know there are some plans for him down the line, so stay tuned. But
very cool.
Yeah, but the Clown Hunter. Honestly, Clown Hunter and Punchline. This is like getting into one of the things that I said up front. There are sort of pros and cons of stepping into a book like Batman when I've written over 200 issues of Batman comics before getting this gig. Is that I am a little less concerned with, like there aren't toys that I'm just like, I need to play with this toy because this is my one chance to play with this toy. Like all the Batman villains, all of these characters, like every member of the Bat family, I've really gotten a time to work with each of those characters and play with each of those characters. And there are certain characters that I have my own feelings about and I want to be, put like give them a real prominent role and prominent story. And I'm working to do that, and I think you can sort of see that in the corners of what I'm doing. But the exciting thing is that I'm much more concerned about creating new stuff. And this was something that goes back to the creation of a book that one of my indie books, Something is Killing the Children, that I found really, really interesting last year, which is that I had expected that book to be a bit more of a like sleeper indie title. Like I was very proud of it, and I was very happy with it, but I didn't expect it to pick up the steam that it did. And part of the steam that it picked up was the creation of this new character, Erica Slaughter, who was this dynamic new comic book character. And that character was, and then immediately starting to see, other like comic creators who had nothing to do with the project drawing fan art of the character. And
That's
starting
great.
to see fans start wanting to know more about her history and who she is and all of that. And it really set something off in my head. And, and honestly, I spend a lot of time reading comics. I love comics. This is the medium that I'm spending my life writing comics.
Outstanding.
At some point, I have a bucket list. I would love to write a novel. I would love to write an episode of a TV show or something. But that's the fun stuff on the side. The comics are the job for me.
That's great, man.
And the real thing that I started sort of realizing is that there haven't been that many new characters created in the last decade, especially in the superhero corner of the universe.
Agreed.
And we're seeing the characters that we are now seeing reach their sort of media peak, like a Deadpool and Harley Quinn, were created in the 90s. And it's just so you sort of see there's a kind of almost a 25-year cycle where these characters build and they find their audience, and then they break into other media and all of this. And it's interesting, and I think part of it has to do with there are pros and cons of introducing characters to a company where you'll never really own the character, and those are very valid concerns.
Sure,
but there is something to the fact that we're still telling stories about groups of characters that just in different combinations, but they've been around for decades now. They're still the same characters I grew up with. And that means that when I sit down to write the Bat Family, I'm bringing in all of that nostalgia from when I was 15 years old into writing the character.
Sure.
Which can be an incredible boon, but it can also be a wall, because it's something that you are limited by how much you love these characters and how much you don't want to, you don't want to hurt the characters you love.
Absolutely.
And you're also and there's always a little bit where it's just oh, I remember this one story from way back when, where I was in my head, I would have done it this way. And you're sort of going back and almost writing your own fan fiction of how a story 20 years ago would have gone. And it's and all of that can lead to really, really amazing stories. And it's just my Detective Comics run is 50 issues of me playing What If with with Tim Drake and all of the Bat Family characters that I love. But stepping onto Batman, I really wanted to create new characters, and I wanted to create a new, more modern Gotham that felt of the moment, that felt like it actually reflects I don't even want to say the world around us, because I'm not looking to do a grounded run at all, but it's but reflects the culture around us and reflects the ideas that are around us and the ideas around superhero comics and all of that. And I wanted to try to push myself in that direction and try to create something new. So that's why these characters have a strong manga influence, because I have a strong manga influence, and I haven't really tapped into that in any of my Batman stories. So now I am excited to actually be able to do that.
That's terrific, man. And really going back to the beginning of your Batman run now, I like the idea of Lucius kind of taking Alfred's role And also, just as you were saying, the new Gotham, I like how you've incorporated it almost into like Bruce and Alfred's relationship, and Alfred saying, "Hey, you've got the power, Bruce Wayne, to transform Gotham and make it the city that you want it to be. What are you waiting for?" And that's terrific. Again, that opens things to new stories. I mean, I was bummed when Alfred died, but also I like what you're talking about in terms of not being respectful of what came before, but that can also be handcuffs and might make you gun shy to disrupt the status quo and do something different. And yeah, man, that's a tightrope to respect what's come before, but also want to introduce new ideas and open things up. So yeah, all I can tell you is I think you're succeeding, and I'm glad I'm glad you're aware of all that, and again, but not afraid to take those steps. That's terrific.
Yeah, and I mean, that is, once again, it's the pro of having done a 50 issue run on Detective Comics. Like I've done, like I feel like I have, I have my Gotham City bona fides. Like
yes, absolutely.
That was something that I knew about the death of Alfred right when I was pitching to take the reins of Batman.
Sure.
And it was something that initially it scared the crap out of me, because that was one of the core pieces of the mythology. And then simultaneous to that was everything we were building in the whole Batman Who Laughs death metal cycle, which had also taken Jim Gordon off the board. Right. So Bruce's two main confidants, like the two people who like shape him and push him in the right direction, are gone.
Yep.
So it's like, and then at the same time, his relationship with Damian's not all too great right now. And like, based on what's happening in Teen Titans. And it's just like, so all of a sudden you have a Bruce who doesn't have the support system that he's had in the past. And like, everything has changed around him, and he's trying to change too. But he's trying to change it. Part of this whole story, my first story was like, it's him trying to change to be what he thinks Alfred wanted him to be.
Right.
Like, and it's a challenge to himself, but it's also one of those things where that's something that, and I hammer it in the issue that was released today, where there was a mistake in that, because he's not being himself. He's being what someone wanted him to be.
Sure.
And so now it is kind of boiling down who he is, and centering who he is, and then creating a bold, like, scary new Gotham City for an assured Batman at the center of it, but as a stranger in a strange land, but the strange land is Gotham, because Gotham is changed under his feet. And so that's really the goal.
That's outstanding, man. And again, here I'm going to show my old fart bona fides, but it reminds me, and I was a very young kid at the time, but when Dick Grayson went off to college and Alfred and him are kind of staring around Wayne Manor in the Batcave, and it's like, Alfred, we're useless if we stay here. We got to do something. We got to move to the city. Let's get the hell out of here. Let's put the cloaks over all the vehicles and the back computers and everything else. Let's live in the Wayne Foundation, and let's change everything. And it was so thrilling as a child to read that stuff growing up on the 66 Batman series and all the status quo. That, wow, all right, now we're really moving. Something's going on here. Something different is happening here. I love Lucius's invention of being the app that can make any car the Batmobile if he needs it. That's fantastic. That's a great idea. Great idea.
I was having a lot of fun with those. Like, honestly, that was my challenge for the first batch of issues, where it was like, I need to introduce a new gadget every single issue. And that was one of my like number one goals heading into the book.
That's awesome, man. Let's see. And again, so many great questions here. Another one from Zach. You and Scott and Donny Cates really inspired to dive deep and create these awesome new characters. Love it. My brother loved Mr. Bloom. I'm just loving all the new characters you're building. Also, big fan of your work. Keep it up. Very nice.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Oh, here we go. Are there plans to bring Damian back into the main Bat book? I mean, he is the biological son, and not having him there is weird.
there are definitely big plans for Damian. The story that's currently playing out between him and Batman, that's been playing out in Teen Titans, is still gonna, still has a few more steps to go in that journey. But there were big plans for Damian, like in the core Gotham stories moving forward.
And this is good too. Any plans for Jim Gordon or Bullock? Well, and I've seen Bullock obviously kind of taking Gordon's role and everything. Huge fan of the characters. See, I keep picking the paragraph questions. After watching Gotham, I always love these relationships to Batman, the city, and the cops dealing with all the crime. I agree with that. I thought your Justice League Dark Run was underrated. How about that from Chaos and Comics?
Thank you very much.
Absolutely,
I really appreciate that.
Any thoughts on that? Yeah, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, like, honestly, my favorite corner of the DC universe, other than Gotham City, is the magical side of DC. And getting to play with all of the magical toys was extremely, extremely gratifying and incredibly fun. And, I'm really, really happy with everything we were able to do with that book. I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of it. And the storyline that I initially laid out, it's still running in the book. We brought in Ram V, who is a phenomenal writer, and he's going to sort of take the steering wheel and park the car in the garage. But he's doing an absolutely stunning job on the book, and I'm really, really proud of it.
That's excellent. I do intend to talk to Ram in the future as well, so that's cool. And then here Ko Wa says the Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story was amazing. I quite agree. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. That was terrific, man. And I don't know, man. At first I'm like, is that going to work? Of course it's going to work. They're both in the alleys. They're both in the, like me right now, mostly in the dark. That's really cool. So, yeah.
And I mean, that's honestly, that was the big thing was, from the very beginning, I remember I was at a C2E2 when I was offered that job. And for a second, I had a lot on my plate. And I was sort of asking myself the question whether or not to do it. But then I just started thinking about how each turtle would react to being in the Batcave, and I wrote that out as this is generally how I would see all of the characters playing out, and that's how the story happened, and it all came from there. I love the turtles, and I especially loved in the third miniseries actually getting to work with Kevin Eastman on art for some of that book, and then also working with Freddie Williams for the entire series. It was,
Freddie's the best.
Freddie is just one of the kindest human beings, and so is Kevin. And
that's great to hear.
It's just all fanboy dreams come true. Somewhere in the stacks of things behind me is a page with both Freddie and Kevin art on it, and I need to find it a good frame and hang it up here in the office.
That's amazing. Jared Flowers, love your detective run and this current Batman run. Any plans for Harper Row or Duke Thomas?
Yes. I can't get into the specifics, but yes.
Of course not. Absolutely, buddy. There you go. And how often do you collaborate with Scott? Whether it be formally or just calling him for advice. Love the references to him in Punchline's origin and Joker's. Absolutely. And also, I do want to talk eventually, as we go through the questions, about your what you're doing with Scott with Death Metal, because certainly I had Scott on a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to Scott pretty much every single day. And that has been true for pretty much a decade now. He's one of my closest friends, and we've been writing and co-writing things together now for that entire creative relationship. He was and part of the reason that in the Punchline origin, in the Joker 80th story, I had it that Alexis K attended Snyder College just outside of Gotham City, which is sort of my own little nod to the fact that I attended Sarah Lawrence College just outside of New York City, where I had a young teacher named Scott Snyder. And that was the start of our relationship.
That's fantastic.
he's been my friend and mentor ever since. And I absolutely love Scott, and we work really closely on everything, even my, like, our creator-owned stuff that we don't have a hand in. Like, we're always like, working really closely. Normally, when I answer this question, I would say, like, I'm out at his house every other week, but given COVID, I've only been out there once since the start of March.
I understand.
But yeah, it's like, I live in New York, he's out in Long Island. I just make the drive out. It's super easy, and we that's where we've broken a lot of amazing, crazy death metal things and amazing, crazy Batman things. And yeah, I have nothing but amazing things to say about Scott.
That's terrific. And also to have a teacher that you eventually really become, a partner in collaborating with and stuff like that. I certainly have my college teachers that I stay in contact with and have been great influences in my career. And I still seek their counsel, but I don't, us working together, it doesn't happen. So that's a real gift, because I know how special a great relationship between a teacher and student can be. And then again, to graduate to really becoming a full-on collaborator with them. That's terrific, man.
Yeah, it's an amazing, it is an amazing feeling. It really, really is.
Excellent. What can you tell me without spoiling? 1027 is coming up,
yes.
Detective, and I'm sure you have a story in there.
I do. I am working with the amazing Riley Rossmo, who I absolutely love and desperately want to do something more long form with at some point. We did Constantine the Hellblazer together with Ming Doyle a number of years ago.
Yeah.
I really, really, like, at some point I will, I want to write a really, really good story just for Riley. But this story, this is a very good story that I wrote just for Riley. And it is a Batman Deadman team up story.
Great.
I think sort of the core idea of 1027 is each story in the title sort of deals with different aspects of how Batman relates to different corners of his mythology. And the editors of the book, Paul Kaminsky and David Wielgoss, reached out to me to ask, like, would you be interested in telling a story that taps into Batman's relationship with the supernatural? So I'm doing a story called A Ghost Story that is both a Batman Deadman team up in the present, but in the past it is a story of young Bruce Wayne asking his mom if she believes in ghosts. And I'm really, really proud of that one.
That's outstanding. That's really, really interesting. What do you think? Two things. One, did you have a chance to meet and ever talk to Denny O'Neil, as we lost him a couple weeks ago? And also, Denny always had these rules about Batman. Now, the supernatural was okay, and certainly that was an area that Denny was very comfortable putting Batman in and stuff. But, he had his rules about Batman doesn't belong in space. Batman is a grounded character, and I love just hearing those kind of contrarian, like, no, we don't do that. Or at least I don't do that unless I'm absolutely forced to by some event or something like that. But so both of those questions.
When I first started, Mike Martz, who was the Batman group editor at the time, sent me a Bible of the Gotham City Bible from the 90s. And I have searched my hard drive for it a million times, and I cannot find the email where he sent it to me. Because it had all of those rules laid out. And it was like, I honestly built the Batman Eternal Bible as a kind of reflection of the original Bible that he wrote. And like, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Denny O'Neil. I've never really properly met him. I was in the same room with him for a few times, but I get really shy, and I'm never one of the, like, I have friends who will always be like, I'm gonna go up to this person I admire and I'm gonna introduce myself and shake hands, and I have never been that person. There have been people I've worked with multiple times that I'm still like, hello, hi, how's it going? Like, I'm not that kind of person. But I wish I had, because I would love to have been able to just tell him how much his work, both as a writer and as an editor, really shaped me, because the Gotham City of the post-crisis Gotham City that he was so instrumental in building, and the entire cycle of stories that from Nightfall into No Man's Land, like up until the Brubaker Rucka era, where I really came in, like that. It's such a singular unit, and it's so consistent. Every element of it feels so much a part of one thing. And and I think some of that was lost in the years that followed, but even though there are obviously incredible stories that happened, but it's something that the consistency of the post-crisis DCU and all of the character work and all of that is just so impressive. Like, especially even more impressive now, seeing how difficult it is to pull something like that off than it was as a fan and discovering it for the first time.
That's outstanding. All right, I'm gonna use our phone technology and have Siri turn on the flashlight. That'll keep me more atmospheric. Turn on flashlight. There we go. Ooh, I like it. There we go. All Ladies and gentlemen, all right, the man in black here. Welcome to another episode of Suspense. This is good. I like this. This is fantastic. I'm sticking with this for the rest of the show, folks. Somebody here complimented me on my Denny question, but asked if you have any personal rules for yourself on Batman.
I have one rule that is like, I don't know that it's a hard and fast rule, but it's one that I've said a number of times, like not only to myself but to other writers in the Batman universe, is that if you're writing a Batman story and there's no part in that story where you could play the symphonic version of the Batman animated series theme that plays at the beginning of Mask of the Phantasm, the one that has the full choral version, then you're not writing a Batman story right. And I am a bit more like, Batman can go to outer space, he can go to other dimensions. Like, having spent a few years working on Metal and Justice League, I'm I love those stories, and I also love the Grant Morrison JLA was huge for me growing up.
I understand.
But honestly, my Batman, the Batman in my head speaks with the voice of Kevin Conroy, and you can, as long as you can play that Shirley Walker theme, it's a Batman story. And those are sort of my only. A lot of it's gut, like a lot of it's all about gut. But that's sort of how I measure gut, if that makes any sense.
No, I love it, man. Did you see the movie in the theaters, Mask of the Phantasm?
I did not. I didn't know. I don't remember seeing it in the theaters.
Okay, and then again, you were a kid, so
I remember seeing the posters for it. I have seen it in the theaters as an adult. They ran it in New York City about 5 years ago. I forget what the
the 20th anniversary. I'm assuming it's the 20th anniversary, probably.
I bet you're right, but it was playing. It was playing at the Sunshine Theater on Houston, and a group of us, me and a bunch of young folks working in production at DC, went to go see it together. That's
great. In Chicago, it only ran for like a week in the theaters, and I was working at this rock station, WXRT, and the afternoon host is a huge comic book fan. He's still there, Frankie Lee. And I'm like, hey, after work, because he was on until 6. I'm like, we got to go see the movie. He's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. And it was so great seeing it, as you know, too, as an adult, seeing it in the theater, the music, like you said, everything about it, even though it was an animated movie. And, maybe, again, as someone that didn't grow up with the constant barrage of animation, as some of the younger generations have, including yourself, it really was an event. And it's like, can you believe this is a cartoon? It's so big. It's just so big. And everything. And even at the end, when Saida Garrett sings the closing credits with she sings the closing theme with the credits and stuff, it's like, God damn, man, this is like a movie. What the hell is going on? Because we love the cartoon as well. But it was just like, God, this is so great that they're treating it with such respect, and it's so amazing. So, yeah, man. And, when the movie was coming out on... I guess it was maybe DVD or Blu-ray for the first time. Marty Pasco, good friend of mine and stuff, and he was one of the co-writers of the movie and story editor on the series. We were down in Salt Lake City at a convention. I made sure that he got invited, and we hung out, and it was so great because there really was this like full room that just had peppered him with questions about the animated series, and it was great because awesome. Deanie Burnett, everybody, Bruce Timm, they all get their due, and it's like Marty never does or never did. And he was a good friend and stuff. So it was really great to see him get excited and everything and tell all these great stories about the series and even particularly the movie. So hello from Milwaukee. How did Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles come about? Was it a nerd dream come true?
It absolutely was. And also, hi to Milwaukee. I grew up in Milwaukee. I love Milwaukee.
Awesome.
But yeah, it came about honestly because the IDW crossover between Star Trek and Green Lantern went over really, really well, because there were a number of years where crossovers weren't really happening in comics, and the Green Lantern Star Trek crossover, while it didn't, I don't think it like set the sales world on fire, but it was something that it was well received and like respectful, and the DC offices and the IDW offices worked very well together on it. And they were basically like, hey, what other properties do we have that could come together? And Kevin Eastman, ever since the Turtles were created, had wanted there to be a Batman Turtles story. And so they reached out and said like, okay, like let's do it. And I was approached by Jim Chadwick to see like, hey, do you have any interest in taking part in this? And it took me about 5 minutes to say yes.
That's excellent. Jim Chadwick, by the way, one of my favorite people in DC editorial. Sweetheart of a guy.
Absolutely. He's incredible.
Yeah.
I love working with him.
He's just a good soul, and every time I see him, I'm always happy. And we always have a nice moment post-con to hang out and stuff and then talk for a few minutes. So that's great. Here it is. Let's see. Doubt Barisha. Dumb question. Was Ruthann from Aftershock the inspiration for the look of Punchline?
I honestly don't know. I am not familiar with Aftershock. Like, I am not a gamer at all. I am terrible at games. So
talk about the origins of Punchline, though. I mean, that is one of the things I wanted to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. So the origins of Punchline sort of they come from like a few different angles. So first off, I started putting together a pitch last summer for what I was pitching to be a Joker book, and it wasn't something that DC had approached me for. It was just something in the back of my mind. And the character that I wanted to create was someone inspired by the Joker, someone who would start listening to the tapes of his, the recordings of his sessions at Arkham Asylum and all of that. And he would start doing that as a kind of like, fixation and like, how everyone dabbles with like stories of serial killers and stuff like that. And, but then all of a sudden he would start losing time, and then all of a sudden there would be crimes that appeared to be done by the Joker, and it would be about someone sort of struggling with trying to keep themselves, but while they're also falling down this dark path. And it was sort of me trying to approach some ideas about how young people are being radicalized by dangerous ideology, and the idea of like, doing a really human horror story. And this would have been right around the time that Something is Killing the Children had launched. And so like, and I had a meeting with Dan DiDio, who basically said to me, like, James, we want you to do a horror comic like this, like you're doing elsewhere. And I was just like, okay, here's my idea of how I would do that sort of in the superhero space. And so simultaneous to all of that happening, I get I finally get the nod that I'm going to be taking over the Batman book. And I know that we're going to be building up to a big Joker story. That was sort of baked into, me stepping onto the book. And as a part of that, I knew one of the things that I wanted to do with the Joker was in both Tom's work and in Scott's work, Joker is a very solitary character. He is a character. It is very much the idea of this kind of singular devil that, you know, kind of weaves through the world and walks through the shadows, but isn't so much doing what he used to do in a lot of continuity stories, where he was running a gang and he had a bunch of henchmen.
Right.
And that was something that I really wanted to get into from the get-go. For one, having henchmen gives you more people to punch, and that's great when you're writing an action comic book. But also, it was something that I knew that I wanted to give a different sort of feel, and I wanted to deal with a bit in the same way that I love in a lot of my Batman stories, dealing with how the city reacts to the idea of Batman. I wanted to talk a little bit about how the city interacts with the idea of Joker. And so all of those pieces sort of came together, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to start writing these stories. And it started with in the backup to Batman 85, Tom King's last issue, where I had a little tag with Joker, and I wrote in some Joker henchmen there, and I just wrote a scary little short story, knowing that we were building towards this big Joker event. And then as a part of that, I started realizing, as I was plotting out this story, not only did I need there to be a representative of the Joker operating in my These Dark Design stories, but I also needed him to have a lieutenant. If we were going to do a Joker war, he needs a lieutenant in his war. He needs some, because Joker isn't the sort of person who's just saying, okay, this troop goes there, this troop goes there. He needs someone to delegate all of that.
Absolutely.
So I started realizing, okay, that means I need to give Joker a number 2 character. That was the first sort of checkbox. So then the second thing that happened, which was a great, very fortuitous, is, Tony Daniel was working ahead on covers at that point, and he ended up drawing Harley Quinn onto a cover of my first arc. And I had initially asked if I could use Harley Quinn as a part of the story, but I was told Harley Quinn's off doing other things. You can't really use Harley Quinn. But Tony Daniel now has drawn Harley on the cover, so now I've got Harley Quinn as a part of this story. And I immediately jumped at that because I wanted Harley to begin with.
Okay.
And so it was something where it was just like, okay, so now I'm building towards a big Joker story. Joker needs a number 2 character, and his former number 2 is now a supporting character in the run. So now solve for X. And that was the creation of Punchline. And so it was just like, I need to create a number 2 character. I need that character to be a foil for Harley. I need that character to be a terrifying number 2 who can operate all of these henchmen. And I had all of these sort of nascent ideas from that original Joker pitch, which I had gotten the sense wasn't, now that I was on Batman, that wasn't, the direction we were going to go. And so I folded all of that into this character, who is someone who is inspired by the ideology of the Joker, which makes her a foil, in a lot of ways, the opposite of Harley, where Harley believed that there was a bit of humanity left in the Joker, and that's what she fell in love with. Punchline believes that there's an ideology behind what the Joker does, and that's what she fell in love with.
Yep.
Both of them are wrong. Both of them are 100% wrong. There's no ideology and there's no humanity. It's all projection. It's always projection. But that's what makes them, honestly, that kind of perfect duality. And I mean, and that's what makes Punchline and Joker such a deadly couple now, is that because they're she's not going to be shocked when Joker reveals I don't have any humanity in me, and if he also reveals that he doesn't have any ideology, she's just going to be like, yeah, no, you do. I don't care what you say. So honestly, that's sort of my journey with the character. But honestly, you never know when a character is going to really catch. And it wasn't until we saw the first design come in by Jorge Jimenez that we were like, oh boy, okay, yeah, this is a really cool looking character. This is a character that people are going to really, really get excited about. And that's one thing that I really want to hand it to Ben Abernathy, the new Batman group editor, is.
I was wondering. Okay, go on.
From
and
the
Ben's
very
an amazing editor. Go on, please.
He is incredible, and I love him to death. And the thing that I love the most about him is that, working in corporate comics, a lot of times when you throw a cool idea into the mix, there's a lot of like, okay, now how are we going to get this cool idea across the finish line? And Ben is just like, oh man, that's a cool idea, let's do it. And that is the coolest thing working in corporate comics. And, and Ben also knew, like, especially from Deceased and all of that, it's like, okay, we are this character is awesome. That means that we're going to make sure that we commission a cover with her right away. We're going to make sure that, and then I was writing Hell Arisen, one of the preludes to death metal. And it was just like, I had a scene with the Joker in it at a crucial scene. And I realized, like, okay, I have Joker with his henchmen there. And I'm pointing to my story a little bit in that comic. So it's like, okay, I'm going to put Punchline in this comic too. And it's just like, from there, it's like, okay, we're building. We've got a momentum going. But it was still one of those things where it, like, the insanity that happened when her first 2 appearances popped up and comic shops started selling out of them was like, that was the coolest thing ever. And I had a bunch of people being like, oh, you were gaming us and all of that. And it's like, for one, I introduced 2 new characters in my first issue, Gunsmith and Mr. Teeth, the new assassin characters. And it's like, that didn't set sales world on fire. Like, I've been creating new characters all through my Detective Comics run and all of that, and that introduced 4 more new characters in this first arc. It's one of those things where there's the mixture of the core idea, the idea of her as a Harley, a foil for Harley, a foil for Batman, a foil for Joker, just caught the attention of a bunch of people, and the fact that we started seeing fan art and cosplay within a week of the design coming out. And there's only been 3 issues with Punchline in a speaking role released to this day.
Yeah.
But that the character's already picked up this much steam is incredible, and we've got big plans for her.
Outstanding, man. No, that is really great. And the guy who asked if it was inspired by Aftershock, he was talking about the Aftershock Comics video host.
Oh, okay. I did not.
Hey, how about this? They're my sponsor, and I didn't realize either, so don't feel bad. Full disclosure, everybody. I didn't even realize. Steve Rotterdam right now is going to punch me the next time he sees me.
I was thinking BioShock.
I understand. No. I totally get it.
Brain did BioShock. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, so this is great. Jesse mentions, can you talk a little bit about your GL story with Alan Scott? Seriously, man, fantastic story. What was it like to write versus the other Lanterns? I will tell you, James, Alan Scott is absolutely my favorite character. I do want to hear about the origins of this story, and I do have a follow-up question, so go ahead.
Honestly, this was something that I was really, really excited to do. I got to play very, very little bit with some of the JSA characters when we brought them into the Justice Doom War storyline.
Yep.
But that was a big, crazy event story, so it wasn't something that I could do something smaller and more personal with the characters. And Alan Scott, and beyond just Alan Scott, Jade and Obsidian and the entire I grew. When I was talking about when I came into comic books in the early 2000s, that was peak, Jeff Johns era, and the JSA was such a key part of that. I've loved Alan Scott as a character for my entire comic book reading life, and I am really, really happy with what we were able to do there. And honestly, so one thing that was a key part of it that was really important to me is actually a promise that Dan DiDio made a number of years ago. And that was a promise that, based on the Earth 2 version of the character, who was an openly gay man. But he was an openly gay man living in the modern day, which is a very different dynamic than someone living in the 1940s.
Absolutely.
And the thing that I wanted to do with that story, as we were introducing the character back in, is I wanted to fulfill that promise. that character was going to be a member of the LGBT community moving forward.
Okay.
And I wanted to do something that was like literally, if you read that story like side by side with the first appearance of Alan Scott in All American Comics number 16 or 17, I forget.
Attaboy.
One of those two numbers, or it's like 27, and I'm totally wrong. But I think it's one of those two.
I'm still impressed. Go on.
But I wanted to be able to work that into the fabric of the character in a natural way that felt very, very true to the character. I wanted to have a nod to Doiby Dickles, his old sidekick.
Great to see him in the story. Yes, indeed.
I wanted to have nods to that initial story and his original origin, and I wanted to open the door for bigger stories with the character in the future. But honestly, that was sort of the genesis of it, and then the other thing that really cinched the whole thing together is I remember I was talking to Andrew Marino, who's a good friend of mine and was one of the editors on the project, and I've worked with him for years. And he was the one who, I was in the DC offices mostly to talk about Batman when he came into the office and was like, hey, do you want to do an Alan Scott story for the 80th? And I said, okay, but I want to do this thing. And then he was like, yeah, okay, we'll make it happen. But then he was like, who do you sort of have in mind for art? And I was just like, well, obviously the perfect choice would be Gary Frank, but there's no way in hell he'll ever be able to do it. Because Jeff has
yeah.
I've just presumed that Jeff Johns has a series of OGNs and stuff that'll keep Gary working
forever
for the next 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
Andrew told me that having worked with Gary before, what you need to do is you need to write something first, and then you put it in front of Gary, and then Gary decides if the story is something that speaks to him. And thankfully, the story did speak to him.
That's great.
And honestly, getting to see Gary Frank art on a story I wrote is another fanboy dream come true. So
that's excellent. Well, James, I'll tell you, and you've opened the door, and I think you are thinking along the lines that I did. I will confess, as a middle-aged cisgender man, that when Earth 2 came out and they reintroduced Alan Scott as a gay man, I'm like, well, wouldn't it make more sense to create a gay character completely from whole cloth? That said, I'm glad you've returned to this, and it sounds like, and it does open things truly to some incredible story possibilities, because his relationship with Jade and Obsidian, I think that is amazing in terms of what does a gay gentleman that hasn't come to terms perhaps with his sexuality. When I have a good friend who came out, and I don't want to be rude, so I hope that's still okay to refer to it that way, but in his 50s, he got married, he had a child, discovered that, no, this is the real me. And I think that is excellent to explore for a Golden Age superhero that absolutely discovers this other side of him that was that was always there, but also had these children. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. And it's because that was my thing, was okay, what happens to Jade and Obsidian? And clearly it sounds like that's still part of the plan. I hope that gets explored. I hope that gets explored. Me too.
That I think is one of the things that makes it most. That's the exciting thing about that story, and it opens up an entire. The benefit of reintroducing the JSA beyond beyond all of the just incredible characters who've been sort of off the table for a number of years.
Yes,
it also gives a lens to tell superhero stories through the 20th century. In a way that's really, really powerful, because it's one of those things where superheroes are even though obviously we're still writing superhero comics today, and I love making superhero comics today, but they are in many ways an artifact of the 20th century. They are and they follow the history of America from the from the 30s to the 90s, in this in a perfect arc. And the characters that were introduced in each era really, really match that. And being able to use these characters to tell stories about American history through those lenses is, I think, an incredibly powerful thing. And I would love to write more stories of Alan Scott, not even just in, as an adult in the modern day, but a story of him in the 40s, a story of him in the 50s, and there's a way to there are really, really cool stories out there to tell that don't change any of the fiber of who that character is, because that is sort of the benefit of those stalwart classic heroes of the JSA, is that they have they are so upright, that they were it's not there in the modern era. It's not like there were a lot of stories of Alan Scott going out on dates. That hasn't been
Sure.
part of the. I don't know. I'm sort of rambling, but it's something that I think that there is a history that you could tell through Alan Scott that would be really powerful.
I completely agree. It's something that Michael Chabon touched on a bit with Cavalier and Clay.
Yeah.
And I think, I really do. I think it is a great way to readdress the idea of a 20th century hero, and being perfectly honest about a very likely scenario that a lot of people were dealing with in a closed society that wasn't open to different orientations at the time. And I think that, I mean, not to trivialize it, but I think if anything, to truly honor that sad period, but also think of the level of heroism to have to not only face the bad guys, but also not be able to be the person that you really are and stuff. I think that's fascinating, and I'm really glad to hear that, because that was my concern, because it's like, okay, so now are Jade and Obsidian suddenly, how do you explain them? And it's like, good for you guys.
Yeah, I see them exactly where they are, with the exact same,
They already had daddy issues.
Yeah,
for
a few daddy issues.
Well, truly, and again, I think that's great, and also it's a great personal, I don't want to say flaw or complication in Alan Scott's world that was already there, but this even makes more sense to say it's this. It's and again, not to trivialize it, but it kind of reminds me of Steve Englehart's brilliance of explaining the Captain America 50s stories.
Yeah.
And in a very different way, but making it kind of fit of, well, okay, but that wasn't Steve Rogers. No, he was in the ice. It was somebody else who was made to believe, kind of almost brainwashed into believing he was Steve Rogers and everything, and that he was the true Captain America. But this is even better, and this is even more honest. And I think that's fantastic. So good for you, and I'm glad that DC is thinking along those lines, because also with all the Harley Ivy stuff, I think there's a lot of complicated feelings, I think, in terms of what's happening in the comics, as opposed to, I just talked to Patrick Schumacher. In fact, I released it today, what happened on the animated series and stuff. So I think that's great. I think that's really great. And I look forward to future Alan Scott stories. So yeah, this was a good tangent. I'm glad you guys are all thinking along those lines. James, I'm such a huge fan. I've been reading your stuff since my freshman year. I wonder if you can talk about your pitch for Detective Comics and what you enjoyed about it.
Oh boy. Honestly, the pitch for my Detective Comics run honestly started as my pitch for a third Eternal weekly series. And it was something that what I wanted to do, which was something that we had already started leaning toward with the Batman and Robin Eternal, is I wanted to do a story that featured the Bat Family I wanted to do a Bat Family team book. And when I first wrote the pitch, it was the pitch was called Shadow of the Bat, and that's what I wanted to call it. And because
one of my favorite 90s titles.
Oh yeah, it's a great title. It's a great title, and I think that's what a title that every time there's a conversation about what old titles should we bring back, I'm like, that's the one.
Absolutely, man. I say that right now in Darkness. Very nice.
But honestly, it was. I wanted to bring all of those characters together. I wanted to explore how they all connected, and my pitch was essentially, I want to write, X-Men starring the Bat Family, but I didn't put it in those terms. I even gave them a danger room. I straight up said it. But my initial pitch for the series had a slightly different cast. I wanted to, and it was something that at the start of Rebirth, Jeff Johns brought everyone into the DC offices, everyone who was going to write a Rebirth story. And you had to basically pitch your story to Jeff. And Jeff would basically be like, that works, that doesn't work, this does.
Sure.
But the big thing that he made me do, which was terrifying in the moment, but I basically had to justify every single character in the cast. And it was something that at first I wanted Barbara Gordon and Jason Todd to be a part of that, a part of the comic. But it was something that was really like it was pointed out to me, and it became a good guideline for the book that if these characters are appearing in other titles, then what's happening in this title, in their own solo titles, what's happening in this title will always be secondary to those titles. So it's one of those things where if you put them in danger, you're not going to believe that they're in danger. So I made sure that it's like, okay, I'm going to build this team, and I'm going to build it out of characters that I know and love, but also that I want, that aren't appearing in any other books. And the one that I was really pushing for was Tim Drake, who I've loved my entire life. I've, had written in some Batman Eternal stories, but I had never really done a up front and center Tim Drake story. And as a part of that same meeting with Jeff Johns, he tells me that Tim Drake Tim Drake needs to die because of the larger Rebirth story being told at the end of my first arc. And at first I was like, oh my God. But then I was just like, okay, I know that before this, I was not going to get away with making this book be about Tim Drake. But now that I get to kill him and that he's not even going to really be dead in the story, he's going to just sort of go off in another place, I can make this entire comic book be about Tim Drake. And because at first I needed to build him up and re-centralize him in the Bat family, and then I needed to make the loss of him hurt, and then I needed to make him coming back in be a moment of real pathos. So it was like connecting all of those dots. But honestly, the core pieces from the start were always that it was Batman turning to Batwoman to basically, put all of the young heroes of Gotham in a kind of boot camp to make them an effective team. And that Batman is and it was creating the Batman-Batwoman dynamic where Batman is a crime fighter. He traveled when Batman was 8 years old, a crime destroyed his life, and he has built himself into becoming the perfect crime fighter to prevent that from ever happening again.
Right.
Batwoman, when she was around the same age, was an act of terrorism destroyed her life, and she has spent her life to become the perfect soldier to overcome that. So there's a difference between a crime fighter and a soldier. It's a different mentality, and it creates a different balance. And sure. That was sort of the core, the nexus between Batman, Batwoman, and Tim Drake as sort of, Batwoman is a slightly more cynical character, and Tim Drake is more of a utopian character, and Batman kind of, could lean in either direction.
Sure.
That was sort of the central piece of the team. But the moment the book really came together was when my editors told me we needed a wild card on the team, because I was pitching it to be all of the Bat family characters.
Sure.
My editor, Chris Conroy, pointed out the very basic thing where it's just like, look at the silhouette of the group. And the silhouette of the group, it's a bunch of street level ninja characters. Mm-hmm. They all look, if you blacked them all out, they all look functionally the same, and they'd all be in functionally the same poses. And so it's just like, who is the wild card character that not only adds an interesting element to the book that makes you want to pick it up, but also makes you want but also just makes the covers look more interesting when you show the whole team together. And the two characters that I came down to was either Man-Bat or Clayface. And I ended up going with Clayface because Clayface is also very useful because he's a shapeshifter. Sure. So it's like having someone who can actually, even though he's a big brawler, he's also very good at stealth. So he's very useful on a team. And so, like, originally, it was sort of like a fun solution to a creative problem to bring him into the book.
Sure.
But it wasn't something that I was really like, oh, this is going to be one of the central drivers of the series. But it was when I wrote the scene of Batman and Batwoman recruiting Clayface, who was just broken out of Arkham to go see him, like a revival house showing the movie that he was in when he was a young actor. Like, in that moment, it was like, oh, I get this character and I connect to this character. And then building Clayface's like friendship with Cassandra Cain and all of that. Like, honestly, this is, I could have written that Detective Comics run for years and years and years if they had let me. That was, like, honestly, it was the best of both worlds. I grew up a Batman fan and an X-Men fan, and I got to write an X-Men book starring Bat characters, and I fucking loved it.
Well, dude, obviously people were thinking about Clayface as well in the comments, and Jesse, as you were explaining, introducing Clayface, had his comment and loved what you did, especially in the annual. But yeah, what did you think of Clayface in the Harley Quinn show as well?
I know it's a very different take on the character. I have not sat down to watch the whole I have not gotten a chance to sit down to watch. I've watched the pilot. I have not watched the whole series yet, but I'm excited to dig in.
You're in for a good ride, bud.
Yeah,
it's great. It's fun.
I'm over here knocking on wood that it gets the pickup for more seasons, and that will ultimately we see Punchline in the show.
That would be great. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Good Lord. Oh my God, James, I got to get you with Pat Schumacher, absolutely, and Justice Halpern. I think that's an excellent idea. I think they're things. I mean, I have no inside information based on the 2 seasons. It would really be stupid for them to go, okay, that's enough, and move on, because really it's great. And there are really a lot of opportunities. And I do think the introduction of Punchline, which I didn't even consider, would be an excellent thing to throw in the mix. And God, so yeah, man, good Lord. All right, I'm going to have to make an introduction between you and Patrick. So yeah. Too goddamn funny. And yeah, seriously, man, that's again, Clayface, another character that you think, okay, everything's been said that needs to be said about Clayface, and you found this in, and that's terrific, man. And seriously, I mean, now he's that much more of an interesting character. I agree with you. And again, these relationships that you've established really only make the character that's that much stronger and everything. So
thank you.
Absolutely, dude. Let's see here. I'm looking. Will you follow up on the storyline for Detective with Ra's al Ghul and his mystery leader?
So that whole storyline is I don't think I'm going to jump to that how much I've talked about this online before, so I'll just give the full download.
Okay.
Like that was a thread that I was hoping would play out over a longer period of time, and the original idea was that the Titans Tomorrow version of Tim Drake that came back in A Lonely Place of Living, my return of Tim Drake to the book, was defeated in that story, and then I wanted him to sort of fall back into the shadows, and then you realize he sort of gets knocked into the time stream after that, and then the idea was going to be that he would have ended up years ago in the Batman continuity and started figuring out what could he change to set the pieces up to then strike in the modern day. So It was an idea of like an evil Tim operating in the background of the whole the whole Batman mythology, and that he would have slowly been collecting this team of supervillains that was going. Raish was a part of it, and I was going to bring in the Court of Owls and the mother from Batman and Robin Eternal. Trying to think who else I had on that. I had, I was hinting that Zatara had gotten an answer, and I had mentioned the Obeah Man, who's another character from Tim Drake's history. So it's something that I was trying to build this whole bigger story. And ultimately, DC decided that they wanted to tell this a different story featuring that future Tim Drake. that became the Super Sons of Tomorrow crossover between Teen Titans and Super Sons, I think. Or maybe it was Superman proper at that time. But
Okay.
so that character sort of went off there and became, something that I wasn't able to touch, and I sort of reconfigured parts of my storyline to highlight Ulysses Armstrong as a character, who's a character I was also very excited to bring back into the mythos in my detective run. And try to build out, and then I was able to sort of, I was still able to reach the emotional end of the story, but I wasn't able to tie up all of the plot threads. But that was the sort of initial plan. But now that some of the pieces have been have been used, it's like, for instance, that was tied to everything that I was building with Lady Shiva and Cassandra Cain, and Lady Shiva is now back in the pages of Batman and the Outsiders. So it's like the pieces are not exactly like where I would need them to like tell that story. And then on top of that, I ended up telling a different story. And now on top of all of that, I've revealed a few times what I was originally planning. So, which is not to say that I'm never going to revisit the idea of Ra's al Ghul operating on this kind of council of supervillains, because I think that is super, super cool. The idea of like Batman's own Legion of Doom.
Sure.
But, I think I might come at that in my own way, in my own time. But, and then I might make a few nods to the old story to be like, see, this is me resolving that threat. But that's not what I was originally planning.
That's excellent. Dude, I really appreciate that, because a lot of people, I think, are protective of storylines that don't develop and don't necessarily want to reveal them. Because, like you said, you can reinvent them in a different direction for future things. So I appreciate the disclosure. I think that's really interesting. Okay, now a non-Batman story or question. Any Woods-related news? A TV show? Maybe a one-shot down the road?
I appreciate you asking. There has been more movement behind the scenes. I've read more. I've read a few scripts of a take on the show, and I'm really happy with it. And I hope that we're still waiting for the final, there's the final green lights to actually get it, on a screen on a television near you. But this is, it's something that I'm very, very excited about. And in the meantime, if you love the Woods, I just launched a new series with my artist from the Woods. And that book is called Wind. And
Tell us about Wind.
Yeah, it's so Wind is actually a story I started coming up with when I was 15 years old. It was it was my idea that I filled notebooks about back when I was in high school. And it's me doing a fantasy epic. It's something meant to be. It was inspired by, Bone was probably the main inspiration for the book, and also the Lord of the Rings movies. But this story is very. It comes at fantasy from a kind of, from an angle. It's not just doing that head on. Here, one second.
Sure, buddy. Yeah, please. I know I've been making you go on for hours, and you're nonstop. Yeah. Nice going.
But honestly, it's this. I'm trying to think like what's my elevator pitch.
Yeah.
But it's a fantasy epic about a young man who lives in a society that fears people with magic in their blood. Because magic in this world is something that touches you and changes you. It's basically if you go out into the wilderness surrounding this small town and something magical touches you, you might start growing bark on your skin, or you might start growing a branch out of your elbow. And it's something that it's seen as like this very dangerous, volatile stuff. And the story starts with this kid named Wind, who has been hiding his entire life, but he's got a bit of magic in him. And as the story develops, he needs to escape the human city of Pipetown because they are cracking down on everyone who has magic blood in the city. So it's a fantasy adventure series. It's got some darkness. It's got some real humor. I put it You know, it's something that I would put on the younger side of YA. Like, we're not shying away from death there. The closest thing in recent years that I've been pointing people to is Avatar: The Last Airbender in terms of tone. Like,
Okay.
it's something where we're not going to shy away from the scary moments, but it is still meant to be a children's story up front and center. So
I'm with you. Yeah.
yeah.
Sounds great, man. No, that sounds amazing. All right, we've been going for like 90 minutes or so. Are you okay, or do you want to wrap up? Because honestly, I don't want to like wear out my welcome and not want you to ever come back to Word Balloon. But are you okay? Because I wouldn't mind if you have for a few minutes more. I'd love to.
Yeah. I'd be happy to go for a few more minutes.
All right, that's great, man. Because I do. I mean, God, Justice League Doom folding into death metal and everything, and just the creation of the Batman Who Laughs. I mean, all of that. I've talked again with Scott about that stuff. Just tell me about your participation in the metal series leading into, with all these chapters leading into where we are right now with death metal.
Absolutely. Honestly, it's been a wild, wild ride. Like, pointing back to one of my earliest answers, I came into like reading weekly comic books right at the heyday of, Marvel and DC event comics, and my biggest, most favorite one was Infinite Crisis. And the entire lead up to Infinite Crisis and 52, the series that was the weekly series that spun out after it. Like,
brilliant weekly series, absolutely.
Like those books made me end up like on the other side of that. I was reading like half of the books that DC put out, much to the chagrin of my wallet.
I hear you, man. I was the same way. What's with this $100 a month comic book addiction that we all had? Good Lord. I know. I'm like, I don't know how I can afford this, but I'm doing it. I don't care. Yeah. I love these stories.
But honestly, it was an incredible moment. And I spent a lot of time really asking myself, like, what, I wish I was in the room where these stories were being cooked up. And that's been the exciting thing. Is for the last few years, starting with metal, the first metal, and the forge and the casting, which led directly into metal, and we were sort of the weird underdog book, because Doomsday Clock was right around the corner, Doomsday Clock.
It's been that long.
Yeah, but and it was something where like all eyes were pointing to that, but we had this like cool, weird story. And we had this idea, and Scott, I remember when Scott brought to me the idea where it's just like, okay, I really want to do something that and he knew it was called metal before he knew almost any other aspect about it. Like, it was something where he could feel it. It was something because it was going to be the first thing he and Greg did after their Batman run. Yeah. He knew it needed to be like loud. And he also knew that it was something that comics at that time, there were a lot of very I don't want to say grim and gritty because I think that term gets misused, but there were a lot of like very serious comics that were taking everything very seriously. And in DC Comics, it was something that I think we can take ourselves a bit too seriously sometimes because we're dealing with such big concepts and all of that sometimes fun gets looked at with a kind of side eye. And so it was just okay, what is the most balls to the wall fun story we could think of? And I remember the moment that Scott called me and revealed the idea that there was going to be an invasion of evil Batmen from the dark side of the multiverse. And it was just wait, what the hell are you talking about? What is this? And we were in a fancy restaurant in Long Island, and he was just pitching me this stuff. And it was just and that it was basically a Justice League of Batmen where each of them had taken down the member of the Justice League that they were each responsible for. And that the head one was going to be this kind of combination of Batman and the Joker. And at that point, none of these characters had names. None of them had names. And I'm pretty sure it was actually and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Chris Conroy who actually coined the term "the Batman who laughs." Like, because the other ones were like Batman the Merciless and all of that, because they're all just Batman, but it's just the Batman who laughs. And then that was just, from that moment, that was the name. But then it was just the idea that this wasn't going to be like, and this is something that, like, especially when other people have written the Batman who laughs, like Scott is always very firm about, is the fact that this isn't, it's not the Joker. He's got the grin and all of that, but that's Bruce Wayne. That's someone who is like, you know, like experienced all of the stories you know and love about Bruce Wayne, who used to be best friends with Superman and all of that. And the moral center of his brain has been turned off, but none of the rest of his brain has been turned off. He is not crazy. He is not like, he is just unrestrained.
Right, amoral. Yeah.
And that has turned him into this terrifying apex predator. And that was sort of the kernel, the idea that this is a truly dangerous character. And it was a character that started growing and was clearly bigger than the other Dark Knights, but also bigger than just the story metal. And that was something that Scott would talk about like a bunch, where, like, because I got to write the Batman Who Laughs one-shot. Excuse
Bless
me.
you. Not at all, buddy. Yeah, exactly. Hydrate.
Oh, yeah. But Scott hadn't, like, the Batman Who Laughs shows up over the course of that series, but doesn't, Barbatos is the big villain, and there were lots of other things going on in metal. So it was something that we knew that character had legs that continued past that story. And we knew on the other end of that story that there was going to be, that Scott was going to be taking the reins of Justice League, and that Justice League, it wasn't just going to be Justice League, it was going to be a whole new Justice League line of books. And we were sort of talking about that was around when I was like, I want Justice League Dark, and Josh Williamson was taking Justice League Odyssey, and Scott was going to be on the main Justice League book, and I was going to pipe in with Legion of Doom one-shots over the course of the run.
Yep.
And that math was sort of all in place before the specific stories of it. And then Scott sort of realized at the end of that story, we are going to just like crack open the source wall. And that's going to be this moment where it's just like, okay, this story has been all about the fun and boundless nature of superhero comics and all that's possible with them. And now we are literally taking the physical wall at the edge of reality and we're busting it wide open. And even if the story had ended like right there and there hadn't been anything, that was like a metaphor more than anything. It's just like, this is the literal, like, now you can do anything in a DC comic book. And that was meant to be the spirit of it, that then we carried forth into the Justice League books. And so, being a part of that, but then we started realizing, okay, this is a success. Metal is a success. The tie-ins are a success. Everyone loves these characters. And now our Justice League run is going to build to something. Because now we've got Metal. It's going to be the Justice League. Justice League is the meat in the sandwich. And then we're going to need
one more slice of bread.
One more slice of bread. And that was going to be the return of Scott and Greg coming together to do Metal 2. At that point was sort of what we were referring to it as. And we knew that was just like, okay, we've got the Batman Who Laughs, and he's going to be a thread through this. And originally that thread was going to mostly happen in and around the pages of Justice League. But then, DC Comics likes money, because who doesn't? And they were like, Scott, will you write a Batman Who Laughs miniseries? And he was able to bring Jock back on board from the Black Mirror, and it was just like, okay, this is like win, 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 win.
Oh yeah.
And we got that out into the world, and we carried a bunch of these stories forward. But it's like, honestly, the really exciting thing is just being able to actually bring something to fruition. And there were a lot of struggles, and there's been a lot of things that, there were a lot of moments that almost like went all sideways. But the fact that now, like Scott this week is working on the script for the 5th issue of Death Metal. We're looking at the first, the first of these tie-in one-shots, and there's going to be more announced as they're going on, and including a few more that I'm a part of. And it's just like, it's so cool to actually see a plan come together, because you, like, as I just gave in my Detective Comics answer, it's just like a lot of plans don't always come together. Like, especially, like, you always have to respond to what's selling. You have to respond to, like, we work for a major corporation that has its own plans and its own ideas.
Sure.
Like, we deal with, like, different, different priorities, like, and priorities changing. And it's one of those things where, like, you have to like really want something to happen, like to make a 2-year plan come to life. And I'm really, really proud of this story. I'm excited for people to actually, like, one day when they collect like the giant, like, the metal saga, or however it's
going to be collected.
Like, just being able to see it all run out. But it's just like, I still remember when it was a whiteboard and it was just like metal, like Justice League Dark, Justice League Odyssey, like, and then there was a line where, like, on the Justice League side you had the story of Lex Luthor, and then on the bottom you had the story of the Batman Who Laughs. You had them collide in a mini event called Hell Arisen, and then that led directly into the big final event. And it was just like, that was the plan, and the fact that we're still doing it is really cool.
That's excellent. When and forgive me if it came out today, when is your first chapter? Like, I'm sure you're going to be writing proper.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be working on the one that's been announced is Multiverse's End, which is we're going out into the depths of the DC multiverse, and I'm getting to play with one of my favorite characters, Owlman, because we're in a world overrun with evil Batman. The person who is most upset about this is the one person who the multiverse is designated to be the evil Batman. Like, and he's got his own agenda, and he's got a few things to say himself. So it's honest, it's big superhero fun, like big cosmic craziness, everything you can expect in a metal book. And I'm so excited.
That's outstanding. All right. Decal Fandom has been asking this incessantly. So here you go, Decal. Love your Batman run on Detective. Any plans for Batgirl and Nightwing for the future?
Yes, read Joker War. Like,
there you go. Very nice.
The whole idea behind Joker War, and this was something that, like, when I came onto the book, is something that, like, in the Rebirth era, I think that in general, just because there was everything happening with the metal cycle going on, and there was everything happening with the Rebirth cycle leading into Doomsday Clock, there weren't a lot of, like, smaller events for the different corners of the DCU that were touchstones that all of the books really collaborated on and touched on. And when I took on the book, it was like, the idea is like, let's do the sort of big event storyline like we used to do almost annually back during the New 52. And I love those stories where you would be able to see, like, over in the pages of Nightwing, how he would interact with the Court of Owls. And it allowed for a lot of, like, crossovers can be overwhelming, but there are also these moments that everything comes together. And if they're working properly, they are the moments that show all of the strengths of an interconnected, like, superhero universe.
Sure.
And so building out a big event where every story mattered and every story plugged in at the end in a big way. Like, this is going to be a story that matters for Barbara Gordon. This is a story that's going to matter for Dick Grayson. And this is a story that, as people have seen with the Joker Warzone, cover reveal, like, also has some things to say about Cassandra Cain and Stephanie Brown. So Like, if you're asking, like, do you have plans for Batgirl? My response might be, which Batgirl are we talking about? But the answer is actually yes in all cases.
There you go.
But yes, we've got big plans. Read Joker War. Read the books that tie into Joker War. They're really good, you guys. Like, they're just really good.
Excellent. And yes, listen, folks, I see other questions. It sounds to me like some of these questions might reveal plot points. We want to read the story. We don't want to get the story before the story comes out. So respectfully, I think James just answered that question. Maria and other people, I would suggest again, as James said, we read Joker War. You could talk about your collaboration, though, with George Jimenez on Joker War, of course.
Absolutely. Jorge is absolutely one of my favorite artists working in comics right now. I worked with him once before on a single issue of Amazing X-Men, one of 2 Marvel comics that I've written.
Wow, I love stuff like that. That's like John's, and his brief Marvel run in the early 2000s. So I love shit like that. Go on, please.
Oh yeah, so it was a one shot that focused on North Star, Nightcrawler, and a Knoll. It was just it was a small story. It's the reason I still get to check the box on my bucket list of writing the X-Men if I die tomorrow. So it's so I'm grateful for that. But it was also I've been in love with Jorge's art since that moment, and I loved him on Earth 2 and everything he was doing.
He was great on Earth 2.
And obviously, his work on Superman and Justice League was just next level good. Yep. And being able to bring him onto the Batman title, especially when we realized, he's going to do one issue right in the middle of that first the first These Dark Designs arc, which is a crucial issue. But then we're going to move him forward so he can do the entirety of Joker.
Okay.
And getting to work with an artist on a full storyline. And I know that's how comics should always be, but schedules don't always allow that. And
sure. Some guys need more than 30 days too to finish an issue and stuff like that.
And
so
especially when a comic is coming out twice a month, it becomes even more difficult. So being able to actually build this story with him and really elevate these new characters we're creating. Punchline, Clown Hunter, who debuts in the second part of Joker War, issue 96, and then there's a third character who might be getting an introduction in the finale in Batman 100, named Ghostmaker, who I'm very excited about.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Honestly, these are Jorge and I, one of the biggest benefits is we're roughly the same age. Jorge is, I think, we're 2 years apart.
Okay.
And we both grew up, which means we both grew up in the middle of the manga boom. Mm-hmm. And both of us grew up reading superhero comics and manga, hand in hand. And our influences, are shaped by that. And it's something that, for years, honestly, early on, I struggled a little bit because I would want to lean into some kind of manga aspects and exaggerations but I would write them into scripts that then artists wouldn't really know what to do with, because I was working with people who didn't grow up with those same set of influences. And being able to work with someone who's so in tune with the dynamic that you are looking to get across is an incredibly powerful thing. And the pages that Jorge is knocking out every single day, and he's about six pages ish into issue 100 right now. So it's where he's already almost at the finish line, and it's incredible. It's honestly incredible, and I am so excited for people to see what we've done. That's really
that's cool.
He is the best. I love him.
And obviously, Cass Sleepy asks, is Three Jokers is a black label? It's a fair assumption that Joker War does not touch Three Jokers at all?
Yes, that is a fair assumption.
There you go. Paul Baker, can you give us any more tidbits about Bureau of Truth? The premise definitely has me intrigued.
The Department of Truth. I have my pins. Yeah, it's all good.
Nice.
I don't know that that's showing up there.
I like it. I'm going to make, before we're done, I'm going to make you talk about the art that's behind you, and I'll take myself out of the picture so it's a little bigger when you do talk about that. But go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
So Department of Truth.
Department of Truth is my first ever Image comic, which I am very, very excited about. I'm working with Martin Simmons, who is doing absolutely phenomenal work. He's, pulling in all of his, Bill Sienkiewicz and Dave McKean, vibes as we're telling this story. It's a story that takes place in a world where, basically all conspiracy theories are true or have the potential to be true. And this is the department that makes sure that the right truths stay true and the wrong ones don't. And so they're out there stopping conspiracy theories from becoming reality. And it's a sort of it's a trippy book, but every single issue deals with a different real life conspiracy theory. So the first issue deals a lot with the concepts of the flat Earth theory, which is tied into faking the moon landing and all of that. And the second issue deals with the satanic panic of the 80s. And the third issue deals with the idea of crisis actors and false flag shootings and stuff like that. This series is trying to dig into some of the dark places here, while also, telling a really dynamic thriller. And there are some core elements to the idea that are part of if I was pitching this to sell this to sell this as a concept, I would tell you the big twist at the end of the first issue, but I'm not going to tell you the big twist at the end of the first issue.
Excellent. Please don't. Attaboy.
But I'm really, really excited about this book. This is something that, this year, between from the release of Something is Killing the Children to the release of my Batman run to Wind to Department of Truth and to a couple of other things that I can't even talk about yet.
Okay.
This is sort of me entering the next stage of my career, and I am really, really excited to introduce more things that I own, outright, that I can, me and my artist co-own them together, but it's the stuff that I can, the pins that I just held up. That is a very small example of that, but that is the fact that I am allowed to just go and make a pin because I've decided that a pin would be cool, and I don't have to deal with the bureaucracy of a corporation to ask permission to make a pin.
Totally.
Great. I love
Absolutely. It. Yeah, no. And seriously, man, no, that has been the recurring theme of a lot of people that have done their creator-owned stuff and can do the tchotchkes and stuff that, that they've always wanted to do. I think that's excellent. Wonderful, man. That's great. All right, now I'm looking about. So let's see. How'd you get Jeff Stokey to do Joker Warzone?
James Stocco.
Pardon me.
We asked him, and
that was easy.
Yeah, no, it's honestly, I'm still pinching myself, and this might not be a one-time collaboration, so stay tuned. But honestly, he the art he's turning in, he's just knocked out of the park. And this is another thing where I love working with Ben Abernathy because giving throwing a real pie in the sky, what if we got this person to work on this, that in previous years might have I might have just gotten a worried look in response. Actually getting he just reached out to James, and James was excited by the idea, and especially the Clown Hunter character is a character that pulls in elements of I always describe him as a member of Canada's motorcycle gang from Akira, multiplied by Casey Jones from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with a little dash of Deadpool, and that's Clown Hunter. So it's being able to tell a story that has that real, like, you know, manga like exuberance is just like, it's honestly, it's just like incredibly fun, and I can't believe I'm like pinching myself that it's real. I was just doing letter edits on it earlier today. So yeah, you should definitely pick up Joker Warzone. It's going to be awesome. There are a bunch of really, really amazing stories in that issue, including another one by me with Guillaume March, where we pick up the thread of Bane for the first time since the City of Bane storyline.
Sure.
And that sets the stage for some of the big stuff we're going to do in 2021. So
exciting.
Stay tuned. Like this is the big part of it. It's just making sure that everything that came before matters and is going to pay off, and everything that we're doing now matters and it's going to pay off. Even the little threads with the character, like the designer and his counterpart who was introduced in today's issue, like those characters are characters that I have plans for that are going to pay off down the road. So, stay tuned. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That's excellent. All right, I'm going to take myself out of the picture for a second, and you're going to tell me about the art behind you, because you got a lot of cool original art there, and I want to hear about it.
Okay, so yeah, what do I got? There'd be even more in the other room. Here, let me actually. There we go. Okay, so starting over here, we have. Let me see. There's my pointer finger. So that was for. That's a Raphael Albuquerque print from the release party for Love Is Love, an anthology Mark Andreyko put together a few years ago after the Pulse shooting. Beneath that is a print by Kevin Wada. It's a Pokemon print, and it's awesome. Up here is the image of the Good Time Sloth from Memetic, which was one of my first Boom series and is now in development as a movie with Lionsgate, produced by Seth Rogen. I'm really excited about that. This was something that my mom got me, which is a USA Today. Like they do this where you can get almost any article they've ever done framed. And even though it was just an online article, this was the announcement of me on Talon, which was the first real press that I got as a comic book creator. And that was something that, it's still like, it's something that, I was like beat red when my mom gave me that, because I was so like embarrassed that, oh my God, this is so corny. But then I've kept it hanging in every office I've ever had. This was a Mondo print that originally there was supposed to be a whole series of landscape posters of the DC universe that Mondo was going to do, but I think this is the only one that ever came out, and I wish I remembered the artist off the top of my head, but I don't. And then okay, that is an Annie Wu Venture Brothers print. That right beneath it is a Sean Murphy. It's one of the pieces from the Wolverine alphabet that he did years ago. Beneath that are the Batgirl and Elektra. I'm terrible at figuring out which way this goes. But yeah, the Batgirl and Elektra, which are Cliff Chang prints, which both meant to look like the Flashdance album and the Purple Rain album cover. And then that was a special print that we did for The Woods, and that's art by Michael Dialanis. And the other one that I'll show, without getting out into the main part of my apartment, this is a Batman Mask of the Phantasm poster that is actually signed by Bob Kane. And that was something that an employee of my mom's owned, and she was able to, she gave it to me for, Christmas one year. And that is like my one, that is both the, like, it is an artifact with a Bob Kane signature, which feels like it's both holy and unholy all at the same time. And then I just have some couple of pages from my Detective Comics run, an Alvaro Martinez and an Eddie Barrows. But yeah, so that's my office. But I've got a bunch of other stuff, like, you know, most of my actual original comic art lives out in the main apartment.
No problem, man.
But here,
the Bob Kane thing is fantastic. That's amazing, man.
Oh yeah.
So, and I got to that's great about the USA Today thing. I had no idea. I'm going to have to do that with an article I had in USA Today. That's great.
But yeah, this is the Freddie Williams, Kevin Eastman team up print that I have not gotten, or not print, original art that I have not gotten framed yet, but will soon be in a frame and hanging somewhere in this office or one of my other offices.
That's epic. That's fantastic, man. Jesus. No, dude, I have like several stacks of commission art and original pages that I've yet to frame, so I totally get it. Yeah. That's great, man. James, wonderful stuff, man. All right, now we're approaching 2 hours. I am going to let you go because I've dehydrated you. and I truly, man, well, and it sounds like great announcements are coming, more developments in Batman and Death Metal to come. So there's certainly plenty more to talk to. Hey, in a couple months, I hope to bug you again before the summer's over. Maybe in September or something like that. If you can come back,
I would absolutely love that.
James, that'd be great. Seriously, man, so happy that everything's been working out so well, and it's been a pleasure reading it. Seriously, it's that simple. So thank you. I love your influences. I love to delve more into those in our next conversation. And thank you for your time tonight. And congratulations, continued success, as I always say, and I mean it. You're doing great stuff, man, and I'm thrilled it's all working out for you because it's a pleasure to read. Well done.
Well, thank you so much, and you have a good night too. And thanks for everyone for listening.
Absolutely, great questions. I'll let you go, and I will wrap things up. James, be well.
All right, bye.
Bye. All right, there we go, everybody. There, James Tynion the fourth with great stuff, and I hope you enjoyed this Word Balloon After Dark, if you will. I don't know. It looked right to do it this way. Great stuff coming up for the rest of the week. Elliot S. Magan is joining us. Man, I've been on this DC kick. Believe me, Marvel stuff is coming. I feel like I'm neglecting Marvel. I don't mean to. God, I want to talk to Ed Brisson. I want to talk to Teenie Howard. So many Nick Spencer. So many of my Marvel friends. Dan Slott is due for another conversation, hopefully. So all that is hopefully coming up in the days ahead. But I mean, in the immediate future, I'll be talking to Elliot S. Magan about his great Bronze Age stuff that he did on Superman, Justice League, and the like, Green Arrow stuff. Amazing, incredible stories. Plus, he's got a new podcast, and I do want to know what he's doing in the podcast sphere. So that's going to be tomorrow night. And then I'm going to pre-record with Greg Rucka a conversation about the Old Guard. Now, it's dropping on Friday, Thursday night at midnight, or whatever. You know, Netflix will make it available after, whenever the official Friday begins. Great movie with Charlize Theron and the entire cast. It's a fantastic military espionage story that is absolutely worth your attention. The great Oni book that he did with Leandro Fernandez was the inspiration, but Greg wrote the screenplay. So we've got a lot to talk about. I have seen the film. It's excellent. I can't recommend it enough. And we're going to pre-record this conversation so it won't spoil as far as a live talk. And it'll give you a chance in your own convenience to watch the film and then watch our commentary. But that commentary will be available on Friday morning here at Word Balloon. So that's the basic battle plan for this week. And Axel Alonso will be joining us next week. Lisa Wu was on earlier and mentioned it. I didn't want to break the flow of our conversation with James. But yes, Axel Alonso will be joining us on a week from today, the 14th, to talk about AWA and his time at Marvel and his time at Vertigo. And I'm looking forward to that conversation as well. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. And as I wrap up every show, stay